Economic collapse, dollar collapse, gold, silver, Bitcoin, global reset, new world order, economic collapse, economic news, political, geopolitical news. Today, we talk about planning for an uncertain future. Jeff NIELSON. Jeff NIELSON is co-founder and managing partner of Bullion Bulls Canada, a website which provides precious metals commentary, economic analysis, and mining information to readers and investors. Jeff originally came to the precious metals sector as an investor around the middle of last decade, but with a background in economics and law. He soon decided this was where he wanted to make the focus of his career. Astute readers understand that we are living in a time of crisis. This is not a crisis about terrorist boogeyman, nor is it primarily even a crisis about the very real threat of global warming. The crisis which faces us is a crisis of government, the corrupt, puppet regimes across the Western world, and the psychopathic puppet masters who pull their strings. These puppet masters are known to regular readers. They are the Western oligarchs who control the financial crime syndicate known as the One Bank. These puppet masters have already led us to economic ruin. Western nations, almost without exception, are not merely insolvent, they are bankrupt. The poster child for this endemic bankruptcy is the United States. Officially, the U.S.'s national debt is a mere $20 trillion, far more than any other nation. But that is just the tip of the iceberg for this Titanic. The United States also faces more than $200 trillion in unfunded liabilities. This is a combination of dumping its bills onto the shoulders of future generations and simple accounting fraud. In the world of corporations, the United States would be legally required to account for the whole $200 trillion of debts and obligations, not sweep it under the carpet and pretend it doesn't exist. Official government budgets are so fraudulent that the Government Accountability Office regularly refuses to sign off on them. To repeat, the United States government's own accountant regularly refuses to endorse the accounting of the federal government, Republicans and Democrats alike. National accounting fraud is a bipartisan initiative in the U.S.'s two-party dictatorship. Neither half is willing to tell the American people anything remotely close to the truth concerning the degree of U.S. insolvency. Other Western nations are in little better shape. In the case of many of these nations, they have been dragged down to the level of U.S. economic decay through economic terrorism plotted by the One Bank and executed by its stooges on Wall Street. Here the poster child is Greece. In 2009, Greece and the United States exhibited very similar economic fundamentals, except on a different scale. Both nations were clearly insolvent. Both nations spend much too much on their military. The difference. Starting in 2010, the economic terrorists of Wall Street manipulated the interest rate on Greece's national debt as high as 30%. At the same time, these terrorists kept the interest rate on the US's gargantuan debt frozen at near zero. Understand the significance here. At an interest rate of 30%, it would cost the U.S. government $6 trillion per year just to pay the interest on $20 trillion in debt, which is only a portion of the actual U.S. debt. Total U.S. government revenues are currently around $3.5 trillion. The world's only superpower could not possibly make interest payments on its debt at the same rate of interest that was forced upon Greece by the Wall Street terrorists. The U.S. would be almost instantly bankrupted as Greece was. Other Western nations are in little better shape than these two deadbeat debtors. The West is bankrupt. The West is also unemployed. Permanent unemployment across the Western world is now some number in excess of 100 million people. Homeless people litter our streets. Propaganda-numb populations ignore as outrageous. Our corrupt governments do nothing but make this crime against humanity worse. The West is no longer free. To be free implies rights, lots of them. We have none. A right is immutable. It is something which cannot be taken away from us, except under extreme circumstances, and even then only according to the principles of due process. Due process is no longer a right across the corrupt West. It is a mere privilege. It can be taken away from any one of us, at any time, with absolutely no warning. All that is required is for one of the corrupt puppets in our government to point their finger at any one of us and hurl the magic word terrorist. Instantly we lose our citizenship. We lose our human rights. We become a non-person. No public proof or public evidence of any kind is required to transform us from citizens to non-people. The puppet governments of the corrupt West have stolen our rights totally unlawfully. They have stolen our rights in order to create police states. They have created police states as a preemptive measure to cling to power, as these puppet governments preside over our imminent bankruptcy and economic collapse. The Dark Ages. Remember them? Nobody does. It was an era of chaos, ignorance, and misery which lasted nearly 1,000 years. It was the result of the total collapse of the greatest empire the world had known, the Roman Empire. Arguably, the United States Empire is history's second greatest empire, not in terms of duration, but in might. Here it is important to note that events move much more quickly in our technologically advanced age. There could be no 100-year war. In our modern era, one or both sides would annihilate the other long before then. The Roman Empire was measured in centuries. The U.S. Empire will be measured in decades. It is a rancid empire, exhibiting all of the classic signs of an empire in its final death throes. Politically and culturally unenlightened Donald Trump, Family Guy. Militarily belligerent. Economically exhausted. The United States, world's only superpower, is a crude, broke, aggressive bully. It no longer has any friends, just those nations who will acquiesce to its will, and those who won't. This out-of-control bully has been goaded into manufacturing one war after another by the psychopathic oligarchs. It has forced the rest of the world to replace it as the world's dominant power. However, has-been empires rarely relinquish power willingly. Psychopaths never do. As these Western psychopaths attempt to cling to their global tyranny, they will easily plunge the world into a second dark age. Then what? Financial planning, in its conventional sense, loses all meaning in nations which no longer have computerized economies, and may no longer have fully industrialized economies. Stocks, bonds. Not much good to us when there is no stock market, and there is no bond market. Bitcoin. LOL. Many formerly committed precious metals investors have become disillusioned with this asset class, at least to some extent. These people forget why they were diligently accumulating gold and silver in the first place. Precious metals are the world's premier safe haven asset class. They have always been so. And they may always remain so. Why? Gold and silver are hard assets. Gold and silver are real money. Readers who think of the paper in their wallets as money require an education. The banker's paper is mere currency. It is a medium of exchange, and nothing more. Real money, gold and silver, is a medium of exchange and a store of wealth. Money conserves and protects the wealth of the holder. Currency does not. Would we still use and need money in some future dark age? Is it easier to carry your furnishings on your back, or is it easier to carry enough money to buy new furnishings? Unless humanity regressed all the way back to the age, any potential future imaginable will be a world of money, not paper currency. In the bleak future that lies ahead, few will be able to afford to squander their wealth by putting it into the bankers' depreciating paper currencies, where the bankers can and do steal that wealth with impunity. In the absence of the gold standard, there is no way to protect savings from confiscation through inflation. Alan Greenspan, 1966. The psychopathic bankers assassinated our gold standard. One of the assassins, Paul Volcker, confessed to the crime. These psychopaths have been confiscating our savings, stealing our wealth ever since. We don't hold our gold and silver to attempt to make a paper profit in the bankers' fraudulent currencies. all that paper always goes to zero, without exception. Such profits are ultimately meaningless. We don't hold our gold and silver as a precaution for emergencies for which we can prepare and plan. We hold our gold and silver in case of emergencies for which we cannot